Let's talk about single-player modes. Fighting games by their very nature are primed for competitive play against other players. Due to their very little luck factor, no teammates, easy to understand rules, and an insane amount of depth, playing against other players in fighting games is obviously the best way to play these games. But what if you don't have another person to play with? What if your Wi-Fi is down? What if you're scared of other people? What if you're all alone in a hotel room that you paid £90 a night for? Nothing but you, the TV with 3 channels, the weird hotel art painting, and the sound of the streets to keep you company. Your only possessions are the clothes you hastily hung up, a Mad Catz arcade stick, and your barely functioning laptop as you stare at the flickering screen from your old friend, the light illuminating your face in the darkness. The only thing that you can think is, what do you mean the Wi-Fi costs an extra £20 for the weekend, hello? It's times like this fighting games somewhat have you covered with a variety of single-player options. Now, back in ye olden days, fighting games were made basically entirely just for the arcade scene, which meant that they were pay to play. Now, obviously, the most fun you can have on these machines is by playing against another human being, but what if no one else wants to play with you? Maybe it's just you, alone in a dingy arcade. The stench of cigarettes and wasted soda emanating from the space-themed carpet. You stare blankly at the Street Fighter 2 cabinet. The demo plays as if it gestures you to come play with it. This could be you. It's all. For all the single Andies out there, fighting games need something for you to do in order to play them. It would kind of suck if you put in a bit of money for one of these machines and it just goes, please wait for player 2, and nothing else happened. No one would even want to try if they were just on their own. So what do? Like, you need to do something, right? Well, AIs aren't too hard to make, right? And we got a bunch of these other characters that all have their own moves and sprites, so why don't we just get a basic AI that presses buttons and does some special moves and we make the player fight against them? And just like that, boom, the arcade mode was born. Basically every fighting game has some form of an arcade mode, even if they're never officially released in arcades. In arcade mode, you fight against several members of the cast of the game, with the CPU getting harder and harder with each fight, until eventually you fight a super powerful character that acts as a final boss. Depending on what game it is, it could be someone from the main cast that just fucking cheats, or it could be a never-before-seen character that you can only fight at the end of arcade mode. Some arcade modes even have secret little bosses if you know how to find them. These modes also generally have fun little distractions in the middle to spice up the gameplay. The most famous, of course, is with Street Fighter 2, with the car braking minigame. Come to think of it, basically every Street Fighter arcade mode, apart from 5 and 1, I guess, have minigames in the middle for you to play. Hell, some of them even help you with the mechanics of the game. First Strike's parrying minigame may be the first time that some players are introduced to the concept, and allows you to try and get the hang of the parry timing in a safe environment. The barrel minigame from Street Fighter 4 is literally just teaching you how to anti-air well. These minigames are quite honestly genius, and I wish more arcade modes used stuff like this. Arcade modes actually have a pretty interesting history that I don't have time to get into today. Let me know if you want that video in the comments down below. However, nowadays arcade modes are generally pretty hit or miss. There's nothing exactly wrong with them, but a lot of them haven't exactly evolved past the several fights and a possible minigame in between formula, so we've seen it all too often. It's nice for the first couple of times that you play it, but not much after that. The next most popular single-player mode, probably, is Survival Mode. Survival Mode works basically the same way that Arcade Mode does. You pick a character, and you have to play through a bunch of fights against other characters in the cast. The only real difference is that Survival Mode doesn't end. There can still be bosses and stuff like that, but most of the time Survival Mode is just a test of how many enemies you can beat before you run out of HP. Between every match, you gain a little bit of HP back, and maybe some other gimmicks depending on the game, but that's about it. While I'm making it sound pretty boring, I actually really like Survival Mode. Something about just seeing how long you can keep going as your HP bar gets smaller and smaller over the course of the fights, having every hit that you take be more and more punishing, trying to take as little damage as possible so you gain HP between rounds instead of losing it, it's a great thrill. If I'm warming up to play a game, there's a good chance I'll hop into survival mode for a bit, just because it's fun and only ends when you fail. It's also really hard to mess up a survival mode, like you would have to really, really fuck something up if you were to make a survival mode that's not fun to play. Why is the Street Fighter 5 logo on the screen? Anyway, other than that, most games have some form of story mode. I've talked about these modes before in a video that you can see here. I recommend going to watch that for a bit more of an in-depth analysis on the topic, but just to sum it up, story modes are very much a mixed bag of ideas. Some of them are alright, some tell good stories, and some just don't even really try. From a gameplay perspective, they're generally just alright. If you really like the characters in the world, then you'll probably get a kick out of these modes, but for me, most of the time, I just don't really care. But there are some special times where developers go the extra mile and make something much more unique than the game modes that we've talked about. And today I have 3 examples of when this happened that I think exemplify what can be possible with fighting game single-player modes, and other developers should try and take notes. And to begin, we have to go all the way back to the PlayStation 1 for possibly the most influential 3D fighting game ever made.
Good morning.
Tekken 3 is an absolutely beautiful game. The characters are extremely fun, the combat is snappy and responsive, the movement is unorthodox but still very satisfying to get the hang of, and the game just absolutely oozes charm endlessly. Tekken 3 is considered the peak of the franchise by some players, and I can see why. Though I don't have the rose-tinted glasses, I can still admit that it is a very, very good game. And whenever you bring up any single-player fighting game modes, there's always a Tekken fan in the back who will pipe up and say something like, "Hey, but what about Tekken Force?" Well, if you shut your ridiculously large lips up, I'll talk about it. Tekken Force is a beat-em-up style mode in which you play as any of the given Tekken characters from the roster and attempt to make your way through multiple stages, fighting boss characters at the end of every stage. The mode itself is actually pretty fun. The game controls exactly like how a normal match of Tekken would, but the camera is at a different angle, and you are forced to lock onto one specific opponent. Sidestepping now moves you up and down the stage, which can take a little bit of getting used to, and your moves have a new context. There's your obvious ones like keeping enemies away by poking them with your big toe, and there's more subtle ones like hell swings being able to hit multiple enemies because of the motion of the attack. Your combos and strings work exactly like they would in the normal versus mode, so if you have a lot of knowledge on the character, you can absolutely clean house on some of the higher HP enemies. I will say though that these early enemies are absolutely a joke. It feels like if I was slightly rude to them, they'd go into a coma. I will say too, I feel the life of me could not figure out how to change which enemy I was focusing on. Maybe I'm just being an idiot, but no matter what I tried, I didn't get to select which enemy my character was locking onto, which sometimes led to situations where I would flip around when I didn't want to, and now my back was ripe for a shanking. The camera's also a bit naff, like, there were several times where the enemies would just be off the screen and I wouldn't be able to see them, but I could hit them and they sure as fuck could hit me. I can't knock it too much though, it's a great little side game on top of an already amazing experience. It also just happens that I'm very bad at beat-em-ups. Anyway, enough of that, let's move on to another darling of the PlayStation 1, Soul Edge, or Soul Blade depending on your region. Soul Edge was the start of the Soul Calibur series and was pitched as a weapon-based fighting game. Every character would be proficient with their own type of weaponry. So we got katanas, a sword and a shield, a battle axe, and it lists Voldo as 2 swords, but I doubt that somehow. With the weapons being a big part of the game, it would only make sense that there would be a mode in which you were able to try different weapons for your character alongside interesting takes on the game mode. And with this, Edgemaster was born, which is simultaneously sounding like an Xbox gamer tag in the name of a porn star. Edgemaster is a unique mode in which you roam around a map going from area to area in order to fight other characters. Depending on which character is there, there's a chance that they give you, or drop, a new variant of the weapon that you're using. And all of these variants actually show up on the model in the game. These variants also actually change the stats of your character. Some of them let you attack faster, some of them let you have more defense, some of them break easier but do a lot more damage, that kind of stuff. A lot of the fights are also augmented in some ways. You have to knock your opponent off of the ring, you have to survive until the time is over, your enemy regens HP, stuff like that. It's actually a really nice spin on the game to have specific win conditions that you need to get, and some of these are hard as hell, dude. It's still an amazing game mode though, and I had an absolute blast with the time that I had with it. If you somehow managed to play Soul Edge on the PS1, I definitely recommend giving this a shot. Well, with that out of the way, why don't we try and go into something more recent? Grandblue Fantasy Versus has had somewhat of a resurgence in the fighting game community as of late. With the sequel, Grandblue Fantasy Versus Rising announcing that the game will have rollback netcode, people have been going back and giving the game a more fair shot. As for myself, well, I don't know anyone who actually plays the game that much, and I can't be asked going back to delay-based netcode, so I'll just wait for the sequel. Also, the price of this DLC is absolutely bullshit, like what the fuck? There is something in the game though that always manages to pop itself back into my memory from time to time, and that is the RPG mode. Now, listen, I'm not a big Grandblue fan. To begin with, I absolutely hate gacha games. Can't stand them. I always get extremely anxious when gambling, and the idea of paying real money for a chance to get something random isn't the most exciting for me personally. Like, the most gacha that I ever do is, like, lucky dip bags for, like, Dungeons and Dragon dice, because I know that I'm at least getting something that I like. But with gacha, you normally just want that one specific character, and everything else is just kind of alright, or you really don't want it. and it's rare that you ever actually get the thing that you want. So I never actually interacted with the Grandblue property before this game, and I gotta say, I don't give a fuck about what any of these characters are saying, like, at all. From an outsider's perspective, it seems like just very generic high fantasy stuff, which is fine, but it's just sending me to sleep. Everything is voiced though, which is a nice feature. It's cool they went to all the effort to get all of the dialogue interactions voiced in the cutscenes. Now for the actual gameplay though, it's actually similar to a beat-em-up game again, in which the game spawns hordes of enemies that rush at you, and you have to take them out using your attacks and abilities before the timer runs out. Now, the gimmick with Grandblue is there's actually 2 characters in each setting, and this makes it actually pretty fun. Having the second person there just to help you wail on the guys adds more to the enjoyment. You can even do sandwich combos with your AR companion and some poor goon. The game actually has online functionality as well, letting somebody else control the second character. Sadly, I don't have any footage of this. I didn't ask anyone to play with me, but you know, it's still a really cool feature, and it'd be cool to go through the whole mode with another person. It's the only cooperative fighting game mode that I can think of apart from Street Fighter X Tekken. Every so often you get a boss, which is generally just one of the other playable characters fighting against you, and sometimes they even let you fight with your companion. This mode is also called the RPG mode for a reason. The characters you play as actually now have stats and abilities that can be changed by the gear that you equipped, not unlike Edgemaster. You can get the characters through playing the game, or paying for them if they're DLC, what the fuck. But for the equipment, you can get that in several different ways. You can get them from missions, you can buy them from the shop, you can craft them, or you can roll them on the gacha. They couldn't help themselves, could they? It's all free in-game currency. I actually can't find a way to buy the tickets. But the idea that they added it is just fucking funny, dude. Like, they really just couldn't help themselves, huh? Despite these amazing game modes, most fighting game single-player modes are pretty bare bones. There's arcade mode, survival mode, and that's generally it. But thankfully, things are starting to look up. Capcom has blessed us with actually giving a fuck about one of their fighting games, and it looks like they're making a completely revolutionary single-player mode in the upcoming Street Fighter VI, with an open world, custom character creation, custom movesets, and a bunch of stuff we probably don't even know about yet. There's a good chance that if this goes well, developers might actually pay more attention to their single-player offerings. Fighting games are always going to be something that's best experienced with other people. Even after playing through these modes again, they pale in comparison to the memories I have of nights where me and my friends would just play against each other in lobbies for hours on end, trying to see who could be the best, constantly trying to knock each other off the top of the lobby. It's just what fighting games are best at, but that doesn't mean you should at least try to make something engaging for those people who don't have the option to play against others. I love this genre, and I wish everything about it was as good as the multiplayer is. As always, a very special thanks to 64MHz, Almost Nap Time, Barudakai, Daniel Wiedericht, Dragon Prox, Games.png, Lady Dantalon, Melodically Me, Monact, Enhoa, Proxycon, Ray W, Super, Tom Tanks, and Zandatsu for being Tier 2 patron supporters.